Indeed, we will share the joy and the sorrow till we've seen this journey through. So last Sunday was Epiphany, and it was a Sunday which is characterized by the images of the Magi, these three characters that are looking at a star, and the star is guiding them to the place of Jesus. I suggested that we use a question as our guiding star as we move forward as a congregation. And again, I offer for further conversation and consideration the question: what is the future we want to create together? When we enter these conversations with this guiding star question hanging over us, showing us the way, it can help frame our conversations with each other. It can also, I hope, adjust our thinking. Now, one of the biggest adjustments in our thinking is that instead of seeing our current circumstances in terms of problems to be solved, we can think of our challenges as possibilities for the future that we want to create. Let's take a teachable moment in the life of Jesus as an example. Jesus and his disciples are walking along, and there they see a blind man. And the disciples say to Jesus, "Tell us about this blind man," being a prophet and all. Is this man blind because of the sin in his life, or is he blind because of the sin in his parents' life? And Jesus says, "Neither. This man nor his parents sinned. He was born blind so that God's works might be revealed in him." I want us to be careful here. What sin in their life caused the suffering? We want to think of this as a moral question loaded with judgment, and it has that potential. But that question from the disciples was first and foremost a cause and effect question. Now, we think that if we can understand suffering in terms of its cause and effect, then we can cope with it. It is somehow justified. Then it becomes more okay. And in addition to that, if we understand suffering in terms of cause and effect, then perhaps we can fix the problem. But in this teachable moment, Jesus is saying, get out of your old cause and effect thinking and think about it in a new way. This man's blindness is not a problem to be solved. Instead, it is an opportunity for light to shine through his darkness and love to break through his isolation. We may say that it is a chicken and egg kind of thing, but I want to say that the chicken is the way that the egg reproduces itself. We got to think about it differently. Jesus was calling on a major inversion of their thinking. This involves a major inversion of our thinking. This involves a serious level of self-awareness about how we see the world and how we orient ourselves to life. And how we see the world and orient ourselves to life is, in fact, our spirituality. Now, we talk a lot about inclusion and we talk a lot about justice. And it's much easier for us to put our values of inclusion and justice into action and to develop programs around them and ministries around them. It is more difficult, though, to name and to define, to share and build programs around our core value of spirituality. But it is our spirituality. It is the way that we see life. It is the way we orient ourselves to life. Is it an enemy or is it a friend? Is it a curse or is it a gift? Is it something to be endured or is it something that is full of surprises and joy, if not in this moment, then around the corner. That is our spirituality, and that is the ground from which the flowers of inclusion and justice are nurtured. Problem solving is a spirituality in itself. We like to think of ourselves as problem solvers. We want to identify the problem, analyze the problem, weigh the various solutions, decide on the best solution, design the solution, execute the solution, evaluate the results, make adjustments, and then observe, plan, execute, evaluate, and repeat the process until we get the levels of results that we want. This spirituality has defined Western civilization for several centuries and has improved the quality of life for millions of people for ages. However, it is not the spirituality for every challenge. In the teachable moment of Jesus, his followers and the blind man, Jesus was inviting the disciples to move away from the spirituality of problem solving to a spirituality of possibility. Let's look at some other examples. We can see a group of unemployed young men as a risk to our society. I remember walking down the street in a part of town in Evansville, Indiana, when I was part of the mental health center there and was part of a homeless outreach team. And we're walking down the sidewalk, and there on the corner are a group of young men that in my youth and whiteness felt a little bit of fear. Now, this says much more about me than it does about them. But the person I was walking with was the pastor of a church just down the block. And it was as if he could read my mind, and what he said when he saw them, he says, "Oh my God, look at these incredible, incredible young men of God." He confronted my social work problem-solving spirituality. That instead of seeing them as a challenge that demanded more police and more prison space, that in fact they were incredible men of God who had yet been given the opportunity to love and to serve. Let's think about it in terms of our own congregation and our own visioning process. What happens up here in between us? The performance creates the experience? Or do you, the congregation, create the experience? We can think in terms of how we can change the actors, the dynamics, the behaviors, and what happens up here on the chancel, or we can focus on what happens in the hearts and the minds of the people in the pews. And who it is that you bring when you come to this time and place. I'll give you another one. The parent creates the child, or the child creates the parent. We think in terms of offering the children and youth programs, and then the parents will come. We think in terms of teaching the children and inviting the parents. But Jesus did just the opposite. Jesus taught the parents and invited the children. But the parents had to be willing to be taught. They had to recognize their own hunger and their need and their desire to grow. Last Sunday, my grandson delighted us. Right before the sermon, he fulfilled the wish of many people here. He got up and left and said, "Bye." And we think we want more of that. And we do. We think that the lack of children among us is a problem to be solved. We worked this challenge as a problem to be solved for years at the cost of tens of thousands of dollars. We want lots of kids being themselves, interrupting the serious adults, grounding us back to our humanity, making us laugh, bringing joy into our time together. Of course we want that. But this is not the reason for children in youth ministries. The delight they bring us is the byproduct of their presence among us. But what are the possibilities for them and their parents? What is the future we want to create together? Other examples of shifting from a spirituality of problem solving to a spirituality of possibility includes the boss creates the subordinates, or the subordinates create the boss. The leader creates the members, or the members create the leader. The space determines how it is occupied, or a space is created by the way it is occupied. Haven't we just proven that over the last couple of weeks? That we have enhanced our sense of belonging and intimacy and connection by simply taking our butts and moving them closer together. We created space. It didn't create us. The teacher creates the student, or the student creates the teacher. Is education designed more for learning, or is it designed more for teaching? The speaker creates the listener, or the listener creates the speaker. I contend that because you are such good listeners, it brings out the best in me as a speaker. See, we can apply this kind of shift to everything in our life. Do we create our health, or does our health create us? Does our relationships define who we are, or do we define our relationships? The kind of student I am is because of the school I attend and the teachers I have, or the school I attend and the teachers I have are because of the kind of student I am. Well, of course, our lives are complicated, and there is an interplay of internal and external dynamics. But hopefully we get the point. The list could go on and on. In each case, when we shift and reverse our thinking, the focus of attention and effort gets redirected. The possibility of a spirituality of possibility is created. This is a shift in power. The power in this shift is that it confronts us with our own freedom, and we cannot exercise our freedom without also owning our responsibility. It is out of this freedom, which all of us have ways of sidestepping and escaping, that authentic accountability and responsibility is born. This is the source of the power that is needed if we are going to create a future together. You have that power. And we're going to talk more about that next week. Amen.